And this
What's he doing?
is to go even further beyond!
Yo guys, what is up? Max on our Path of Exile 2 video, and today we are updating our Ice Shot build. Now, I swapped off of Ice Shot to update the Lightning Arrow build, and I've gotten a bunch of better gear, and I've learned a bunch of things, and there was a lot of quality of life on the Lightning Arrow build, being able to use Dual Herald, being able to use Grim Feast. That was super nice, and I wanted to see if we could take some of those lessons and like make a much better Ice Shot build, which I think I've done. One of the big issues with how I left the last iteration of our Ice Shot build was simply the fact that there was like 3 variants. There was like Ice Shot Core, and then there was the version with Grim Feast for survivability, and then there was the version with the Dual Heralds for clear. And the whole goal with this update was to see if we could homogenize the build so that we would have Dual Heralds, Grim Feast, a ton of damage, and not have to like do anything wacky with our gear. And I think we've done all of that and made the build just way stronger. So I hope you guys enjoy the full build breakdown. Let's get right into it. So let's start by talking about big changes. And there's a few things that we are doing. So first off, our Ice Shot is currently doing ludicrous amounts of damage. We've got, with fully stacked, we've got like 142,000 damage with it in the hideout, which is, you know, pretty gnarly. And that's using a bunch of gems that, like, you know, are not actually increasing the damage on it. But our Ice Shot is doing a ton of damage. In terms of like Ice Shot versus Lightning Arrow, I made a video kind of talking about the difference between these two, but we're sorting out a lot of the weaknesses of Ice Shot in this, and also Ice Shot just inherently will deal more damage than Lightning Arrow. Lightning Arrow has a bit more base attack, however, Ice Shot converts way more of your fizz damage to cold, and so its like inherent attack will be a bit stronger. The one weakness with Ice Shot is that it doesn't kind of go like sideways as much as Lightning Arrow does, but we're kind of solving some of those issues here, and it's feeling really, really good to play. So what did we change to the build to make some of these big damage improvements? First off, we are no longer going for Ricochet. In the last build video, we were using a Trick Shot and we were using Ricochet, and that was cool. The only thing is it like really only felt great on indoor maps, and right now for farming Breach, I want to be farming outdoor maps, and so it didn't feel worth to have not only a support gem in the build, but also like multiple points invested into something that was a little bit more gimmicky. It's still really good, but like the Trick Shot and Ricochets was more focused on giving Ice Shot the ability to be a boss skill so that it could bounce against a wall and hit a boss, but we're now just using Lightning Rod for bossing, and so that's not really relevant anymore. So one of the big changes is we're going to be using Fork instead of Ricochet. This allows Ice Shot to actually, you know, kind of go a lot more sideways, so it can kill more enemies when you're shooting into a pact. The other thing that's really nice about Ice Shot is you actually don't want Pierce on this. Lightning Arrow can benefit from Pierce. With Ice Shot, we want that first arrow to hit the enemy and then do this like big shotgun AoE that hits all of the enemies behind it and send out all of those shards. And so we're not going for any Pierce, we're getting Fork, and this is going to allow us to shoot at one enemy and just blow up everything around them. Which is really, really awesome. So we're replacing the like Ricochet with Fork. There are other like support skills that you could use, but like, for example, Chain gives us 50% less damage on just the attack. Fork only makes it less damage after forking, but those like fork projectiles are only from the forking projectiles versus the other ones. Like the main projectiles are not actually forking, and so we still get to keep all of our damage. The other thing that we're doing is we're changing, and this is going to be a bit difficult to explain, but we're changing to ambush on Ice Shot. Obviously, if we're going crit, we want a lot of crit chance, and this is a trick that we were using in the lightning arrow build to basically double our crit chance. Currently on the build, I'm sitting at 37% crit chance and 521 crit damage bonus, which sounds really great, or it feels really great. You are going to try to want to get to above 37% crit chance on this build, and Ice Shot inherently, the way that we spec the skill tree, will have more crit chance than lightning. But the big change that we've made to accommodate all of this is we're actually using cast on shock. We are not using cast on crit. And I know that's a bit weird because we're using Ice Shot, but the way that we've set this up is if we go over to our Ice Shot right now, our Ice Shot is actually dealing more lightning damage. I am dealing a ton of lightning damage on Ice Shot. In the old build, we were using a Call of the Brotherhood to turn all of our lightning damage into cold, and then change that cold damage, or funnel all that lightning damage into cold, and buff up the damage of our Ice Shot. But if we take off the Call of the Brotherhood, then we can shock with Ice Shot, which makes it easier to proc both of our heralds with our Ice of Thunder. So now our Ice Shot's technically doing both. It's shocking and it's freezing, and it's going to hit harder, and it's going to be able to trigger shock on enemies, which is another damage multiplier. So we were still keeping all of that damage, and we don't have to use a unique ring that pigeonholes us, so we can use like higher damage rings. And that's why we're not going to be using like cold infusion or anything on our Ice Shot, is because we don't want to lose like all of this lightning damage. And so we're actually able to run a cast on shock setup with our Ice Shot. And the one thing that does suck about cast on shock is it's not going to proc as much in maps. So you're not going to see as many like Eye of Winters going out when you're mapping. It works really, really well on bosses, just as well as cast on crit for bosses. But the thing that's actually beneficial for us is when we're not sending out as many Eye of Winters, these things were hitting enemies, right? They weren't doing any damage, but they were hitting enemies, and they were giving us a bit more crit chance against them. However, that was kind of bricking ambush. We couldn't use ambush before, but now that we're technically sending out a little bit less Eye of Winters in our maps, we're going to be able to shoot at enemies at full life more often. And, you know, if an enemy only gets hit by one Eye of Winter, it's only 0.5% base crit, versus ambush is giving us double crit chance. And so while we are losing a little bit of procs while we're mapping, I think it's for the better, because then our Ice Shot's going to crit more consistently. And we're going to get this big damage against enemies that are at full life. And so those are some of the big changes that we've done. And obviously, cast on shock only requires 60 spirit, versus cast on crit is 100 spirit. So we save 40 spirit on the build, which allows us to run Grim Feast, which is just a disgusting amount of survivability. We don't know what's going to happen with the patch notes yet. We get them in a few days, but Grim Feast is so powerful for mapping. Right now on the build, I'm sitting at 925 energy shield. We have more energy shield than we did on the shock build, and so we're able to stack up more than double that basically. So we're getting 2,000 energy shield and 2,000 life, which feels very, very comfy. So now let's go over the full skill gem setup on Orbis Storms. We kind of already talked Chain, Font of Mana, Font of Rage. On Ice Shot, we've got Primal Armament, Martial Tempo, Ambush, Fork, and Heft. And then one thing you'll note here is you kind of have a bit of an option that, I've been messing around with a little bit. So previously on the build, we were using Tornado Shot, and Tornado Shot is fantastic. I love it. It allows us to basically spread all of our projectiles everywhere. Because of the nature of Ice Shot, it works really well, Tornado Shot, with Ice Shot, because it fires more of our initial projectiles. So we're going from one of our initial projectiles to 4. Or technically when we're firing 2, we're going from 2 projectiles to 8. But these are pre the projectiles splitting. So then we get 8 projectiles all firing out, which are then resplitting into our 8 shards that we get just inherently from 8 Ice Shot. So we just get so much extra damage out of Tornado Shot and area coverage. It's really, really nice. However, once you get to a certain point of your gear where you're basically just one-tapping everything, Tornado Shot doesn't like bring that much because, you know, we're just one-tapping everything with Ice Shot and causing massive explosions with our heralds. So one thing that you can do, and I'd recommend that you try this out if you are at a good level of gear, is you can actually put on Blink as a like second weapon. I've got mine with Arcane Tempo and Ingenuity, but if you use a second weapon, it really like doesn't need to be that deep. You don't really need to even use like a second whole skill tree, but you can pick up a crest or the Jingling Crest Shield, which gives you 15% cooldown recovery, and then as a weapon swap, we can use Blink. You don't want to have like any of your other auras active because, you know, we're using too much spirit to have Blink in a not weapon swap. But if we put it in a weapon swap, we can use a shield, and then you just, for example, if, I have raise shield as a middle mouse click, so I raise shield, and then I can dodge, and then I can just shoot. And this helps with just, you know, movement speed and maps. You can pull out your shield, and then by pulling out your shield, you're gonna immediately be able to teleport. Kind of like Temporalis at home, but if you're looking for some additional movement speed and you're not having any issues with your clear, you can use that little tech just to get around faster. I wanted to showcase both because some people are going to like Tornado Shot more, some people are going to like Blink. They're both good, and you can use whichever one you feel more comfortable with. I'm probably going to be using Blink, to be honest, because our Ice Shot's just kind of one-shotting everything. But yeah, just wanted to showcase that. So for the rest of the stuff with Ice Shot, kind of already went over those supports. For Lightning Rod, we've got Close Combat, Scatter Shot, Concentrated Effect, Conduction, and Lightning Pen. This is dealing full lightning damage, so we're still building it like a lightning skill. However, once again, for bossing, we swap our Close Combat and Primal Armament and our Heft and our Lightning Pen. And then like specifically for Pinnacle bosses, I only do this swap for Pinnacle bosses. You can swap your Tornado Shot and your Blink for Conductivity so that you can strip lightning reses. But once again, that's really only for Pinnacle bosses. And then in Herald of Thunder, same setup, Ice Bite, Lightning Mastery, Glaciation, Cold Infusion. On our Herald device, we're going to be using Innervate, Lightning Infusion, Long Shot. This is coming out of Ice Shot and going into our Herald device to make it deal even more damage. And then we've got Magnified Effect. And then Wind Dancer, we got Cannibalism, Blind, Maim, Cast on Shock. We got Ball Lightning, Inspiration, Eye of Winter, and Impetus. And then for the last thing, we're using Grim Feast with Clarity for some extra mana regen. Now let's go over our skill tree. And one thing to note is our Ascension is still the exact same. We're still going Endless for the extra projectiles. A lot of people are like, how are you firing 2 projectiles? Endless gives us an additional projectile, so that's huge. It's literally 100% more damage. We're using Point Blank still. Point Blank mainly for bossing and just killing things that are next to us. And then we got Gathering Winds and Windward for Tailwind stacks and the DR. Then to get into our skill tree, we are pathing this way to stack up a bunch of intelligence and grab Honed Instinct for the projectile speed and attack speed. We do this to save some points, but also intelligence with the Hand of Wisdom and Action Gloves is actually a lot of damage. So that gives us a bunch more extra damage. We're grabbing Master Fletching for more quiver effect. The skill tree is looking pretty similar. We're grabbing Catalyst for the elemental damage and the DR, Escape Velocity for more movement speed and evasion, Acceleration for more movement speed and skill speed, Sniper, Feathered Fletching. Same with all of these crit nodes here, our Herald nodes to give us 50% more cold and lightning. We path this way rather than this way to get a Jewel Socket. It is 1 extra point, but Jewel Sockets are really valuable at endgame because they can add so much damage. We're grabbing all of the dexterity, attack speed, and evasion rating from this. We're still using it against the darkness with extra lightning damage. I kind of liked cold, like an against the darkness with cold for the lightning arrow build. Against the darkness with lightning actually works really well for this cold build because we can kind of, you know, get both of the elements. Still using all of this to give less the like lightning, cold pen, and also because we're using against the darkness, all of these big key notables are giving us 4% of our damage as extra lightning damage. This is a big upgrade from the last time made an Ice Shot build. We just didn't have something like this. We're still going up to this big crit wheel to grab all of these crit bonuses and crit chance. I freaking love this wheel. This is like, 20, 40, and then another like 70% damage whenever we crit, which is all the time on this build. So while these nodes don't really reflect in our like sheet DPS, if you shoot once and crit, you'll note that your damage just skyrockets. And then we're going up to grab Spectral Ward. This gives us one more max energy shield per our evasion rating. If you don't have a good energy, or if you don't have a good like evasion chest piece, you don't need to go Spectral Ward. You could go Subterfuge Mask instead. The only reason that I kind of currently prefer Spectral Ward over Subterfuge Mask, I keep going back and forth. Sometimes we have both, sometimes we have one, sometimes we have the other. Is me personally, I swap on this helmet that has a bunch of rarity on it for my juiced maps. A lot of people ask me how much rarity I run. I'm typically running around 100% rarity on my gear, but that's when I put this helmet on. And this helmet, I definitely should get a better one, but this helmet just doesn't have a lot of energy shield compared to like my normal helmet that I'm rocking that has a ton of like energy shield. And so Subterfuge Mask only working half the time doesn't feel that great. That's kind of like a me personal build issue. So that's why I go to Spectral Ward. But the big difference of speccing up to Spectral Ward rather than Subterfuge is we get another gem socket. And so once again, gems, if you're going to get good ones, can give you tons of damage. You get like 10,000 damage increase per jewel socket if you're buying good ones. And then we have like kind of an issue, or not an issue, but kind of a question, is this is the core of the build, right? All of these things I don't think I would ever change. The last thing is, what do we do with the rest of the points? And I messed around with a lot of things. I tried a bunch. For example, we went up to Thin Ice and we grabbed Thin Ice and Heavy Frost, and like, we're a cold build, so you'd think that all of these cold and freeze buildup would be great, and then damage against enemies that are frozen would be great, and hits ignoring resistances of frozen enemies would be good. But I actually found this to not be worth for a few reasons. One, we're one-shotting most things, and then I was like, okay, well, maybe these would be really valuable against bosses. And then we did some boss tests, and we were killing them before they were even frozen. Like, we are just doing so much damage that even though these are good on paper, they're not actually really that great for us. And I didn't want to grab many skills that, like, really aren't applying that much. So while these skills do sound good for our cold buildup, I actually pivoted away from them. And what we are going to do is we're going to come down here to this node. Now, we do need shock chance. We just kind of want to grab a node of shock chance. And so I was experimenting with going General Electric, which gives us the big shock chance, but the attack and cast speed only really applied to Lightning Rod, so it's not up all the time. So what we ended up doing is we came down here. We were in here in the old Ice Shot build. This gives us 5% of our damage is extra lightning damage, but the 30% chance to shock paired with this 15% chance to shock gives us basically guaranteed shock all the time. And then we get to get Crashing Wave, which is another 36% damage if we dealt crit, plus we get 2 crit nodes, and then we can go Flow Like Water for increased attack and cast speed. And then we can also grab Mindful Awareness for the increased evasion rating and max energy shield. This node is very, very nice. So this gives us a bunch more evasion and energy shield. And that's kind of what we're doing with the last bit of the build. The only other thing to mention is I am still using my Megalomaniac Jewel from the Lightning Arrow build. These can be a bit difficult to search for. And honestly, going Essence of the Mountain on this is not super important for this build. These Megalomaniacs, just knocked my mouse over. These Megalomaniacs can give you up to 3 skills for free randomly on the skill tree, and you can find some really, really good ones. If you're looking for ones for this build, there's a whole lot of good options. Moment of Truth can be pretty good. You can get High Alert for a ton more evasion rating. I really like this one. You could get Harness the Elements. You could get Overwhelming Strike for more crit chance and crit damage. I think that's a really good one. We are anointing Doomsayer, so you could find Doomsayer and then anoint something else on your amulet. There's a whole bunch of just like good nodes that you could get. I would try to find some with, some like synergy between a few skills, but like, even if we're not going these skills, you could technically still get it on your like Megalomaniac and get some damage from that. But yeah, I just wanted to point that out, that this is kind of like an end game kind of cherry on the top. Build doesn't need this to function, but it does give us a fair bit more damage currently. Our gear, and to be honest, my gear is exactly the same as the lightning arrow build. They're like incredibly easy to swap between. So like if you're on lightning arrow and you want to try ice shot, you don't really need to do much. And if you're on ice shot and you want to try lightning arrow, you once again really don't need to do much. The builds scale and prioritize just about the exact same things. And so right now, this is my bow. I get a lot of questions about this. You know, the big thing for a crit build, once again, is your base crit, which comes from your bow. If you are looking to scale up your crit chance, no matter how much you get of crit chance, if you don't have like much on your bow, you're not going to be getting much from those attributes. So if you can get a high crit chance, which I would consider 4 or higher, you're going to get a lot more scaling from crit. Crit damage bonus is multiplicative on your bow, so that's another thing to get. Right now, the bow market is a bit insane, and getting a good bow with crit chance and crit damage can be very expensive. So I recommend, if you don't have a lot of currency, to just get a bow with crit chance, ignore crit damage for the time being, simply because it is very expensive to do. But just to show you an example, for example, I only have 36% crit damage bonus on this, but if we look at my crit damage, I'm at 521. Obviously, if we just randomly put on this bow, this doesn't have any crit damage bonus, but that 36% is giving me a multiplier, so I go all the way down from 520 to 383. So getting crit damage bonus is super valuable, but it is expensive. But if you're really looking to scale your endgame damage, that can be massively impactful. And then for like the rest of the gear, on your helmet, get some big energy shield, get some max life. If you can, I'm going to try to find one with crit chance. Getting crit chance and like double res as a suffix on your helmet can be really nice. Our rings, we're both using big fizz and cold with some max life and some reses. On this ring, I've also got some damage. I don't have life on this one, but I do have 25% increased lightning damage with some resistances, which is really nice. My quiver stays the same. Crit chance, added cold, damage with bow skills, damage with projectile speeds, crit chance, crit damage, and then some life, which doesn't really do anything. Getting the damage with bow skills, projectile speed together in combo is a huge damage increase. And then obviously if you're going crit, you really want some crit chance and crit damage on your bow or your quiver. I do think quivers, especially for like hyper late game, are technically more valuable than your bow because all of these stats are going to get multiplied. So getting a good quiver is almost certainly worth it. On our chest piece, still using the same one. Got a ton of evasion rating, 1730, with some spirit and some reses. On my amulet, I've got a bunch of spirit. We're allocating Doomsayer. Doomsayer, I like mentioned it, but I didn't really explain it. Doomsayer gives our herald skills 30% increased area of effect and more damage. This is a lot of clear speed. We don't know if they're going to adjust heralds yet or not, but this 30% AoE allows our herald skills to clear the screen when we shoot into an area, which is really, really nice. For our gloves, Hand of Wisdom in action, these add a gigametric F-ton of damage to the build. Headhunter for the ability to get a bunch of modifiers when we're doing breaches. Headhunter allows us to gain really, really powerful buffs whenever we kill rares, which allows us to snowball in breaches, and you'll see your character just become way more powerful the more monsters that you kill. And then lastly, my boots, I got some movement speed, some max life, some mana, some rarity, some dex, and some reses. Wouldn't really change too much about these. Pretty happy with those boots. Real quick, just to go over my jewels, I'm still using the same ones from the lightning arrow build, which is fine. We've got some lightning damage here, crit damage, and damage with bows. Just relatively cheap gem, but adds a bunch of damage. I'll go over how much damage each one adds. So we're at like 122. We take this off. That one's adding about 7k. This is probably my best jewel. It's got evasion, crit chance, crit damage, and bonuses from quiver. This one is adding about 10,000 damage. This Damnation Star, we've got crit chance and bonuses from our quiver and some accuracy. This one's adding about 7k. This jewel's got attack speed, bonuses from our quiver, and shock magnitude. This is one I would definitely consider swapping out, but just kind of what I have right now. This one's adding about 6k damage, so that's definitely our weakest one right now. Obviously, the Against the Darkness adds a ton of damage. This one's adding like 23,000 damage to the build, which is pretty nice. Then we get up to our new good one, which has got lightning damage, crit chance, attack speed, and bonuses from our quiver. This one's adding about, looks like about 9,000 damage, almost 10,000. And then lastly, we've got our Megalomaniac Diamond, which is giving me Crusher's Verdict and Essence of the Mountain. And this one's giving me, looks like about 13,000, or sorry, 11,000 damage. So all of these things, you know, people always ask me like, hey, how are you scaling your damage so much? It's not just like one thing. It's always like a combination of things. You know, if I take off all of my diamonds, I'm going to go down like, or take off all my jewels, I'm going to lose like, you know, 50,000 damage. So getting jewels that are good and valuable and scale your build can be a huge increase, especially once you're in the late game. Getting the bonuses from your equipped quiver and getting a good quiver will really help with your end game damage. Guys, that is going to do it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. Once again, you know, between Lightning Arrow or Ice Shot, you really can't go wrong. Both are really powerful. If you are having issues on the like Lightning Arrow build with freezing and getting your heralds to proc, I would recommend you trying Ice Shot. One thing that definitely was super noticeable on the Lightning Arrow build is if we were ever running a map that had ailment threshold, which would make it monsters like 100% more or more difficult to apply like shock or freeze to, it could really hurt the clear of the build. However, this build, because we're primarily doing ice damage, is like just does an F-ton of freeze whatever we're shooting. And so I've never once had issues like proccing heralds. It's basically guaranteed on this build. Whereas on the Lightning Arrow build, you know, there could be some modifiers that could make it a little inconsistent. And so I think both skills are really powerful. They both do a ton of damage, and they're really, really easy to swap between, to be honest with you. And so it's a little bit of personal preference. I like both. But yeah, guys, that's going to do it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. I will catch y'all in the next one, guys. Take care. Bye.